First day as Premier, I set out to clean up their irresponsible actions and address these issues. I also want to point out that this is not about the work of men and women working on this project. They're hardworking individuals, and they have done what they've been asked to do. So this is not about those hardworking men and women doing their job on the project. Almost 2 years ago today, Minister Cody and I sat at this table and announced an independent review of the cost, the schedule, and the associated risk of the Muskrat Falls project. From that initial step, we have also taken many other actions. Stan Marshall was named the Chief Executive Officer. There's a new board of directors, expanded oversight and reporting, which included independent members on that oversight committee. Finalizing the Estaldi contract, and this was a contract, lots of questions that were not made public around mid-2015. Added to that, we've negotiated and secured additional federal loan guarantee and changes in the federal loan guarantee to the benefit of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. And most importantly, we have increased confidence in the cost estimates and the timelines associated with this project. Construction on all components of the project is well advanced, and overall construction has now reached 85% as of the end of September 2017. And you think about it, in June of 2016, this is a project that was 48% complete, and at the end of September 2017, 85% complete. That is a significant amount of progress in that time frame. Now, throughout 2017, significant work has been completed on the transmission and generation components, and many milestones achieved. Workers have made great strides and achieved great progress. However, our focus is unwavering. In addition to correcting the course of Muskrat Falls, my government also has a responsibility to get answers. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians deserve them, and they've waited long enough. Today, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians can rest assured that these answers are coming. Today marks the start of the Muskrat Falls inquiry. It will be led by Justice Richard LeBlanc. A public inquiry will provide a greater understanding of whether all options were considered at the time of sanctioning the project, why there are significant differences between the actual cost of the project and the estimated cost at the time of sanction. Also, we need to know whether it was justified and reasonable for the project to be excluded from the oversight of the Public Utilities Board. The inquiry will also provide findings and recommendations. We will learn if the project today is indeed the project that the people of the province were sold in 2012. The Muskrat Falls project was originally sold to the people of the province to be just over $5 billion. Today, the cost has risen when you add in the interest during construction to be $12.7 billion. Literally billions of dollars of an inherited problems. Literally billions of dollars of lost opportunities for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. While we cannot undo the past, we can learn from it and make better. More informed decisions, and we need to minimize the impact of this project on ratepayers. Addressing electricity rates has been and will continue to be a priority of my government. If no rate management efforts were taken, electricity rates will double in 2022. This is unacceptable. And as I conclude, Muskrat Falls is on the minds of all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, deservedly so. Public confidence is paramount, and I am extremely pleased to have this inquiry led by the Honourable Justice Richard LeBlanc. Let me be clear. The work before us is significant, but it is much needed. As I said earlier, today marks the start of getting the answers. We are both reviewing the past and the present of the Muskrat Falls project while working to address the future impacts on the people of our province. At this time, I'd like to invite Minister Cody and then Minister Parsons to speak to their involvement in these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. The former government's poor assumptions, lack of cost control, and effective project management have led us to where we are today, with a project that will cost us, as the Premier indicated, $12.7 billion, and will result in substantially increased electricity rates when the project is commissioned 2 years behind schedule in 2020. We have consistently questioned the decision-making process of the former government on this project, knowing why decisions were made as they were and why costs were not accurate must be clearly understood so that it never happens again. Given this reality, today we are announcing the terms of reference for a public inquiry. This approach responds to public concerns to have the project reviewed as soon as possible, maximizes transparency, and provides for an independent assessment of the issues raised in the terms of reference. The Commission has the authority to do any financial investigation it chooses, including a forensic or process audit. The inquiry will address project sanctioning and execution, exemption of the project from pub oversight, and project costs and schedule. The terms of reference outlines the specific questions we are asking the Commission of Inquiry to consider. Whether the assumptions and/or forecasts on which the analysis of options to address electricity needs was based were reasonable. Whether Nalcor considered and reasonably dismissed options other than the Muskrat Falls project. Whether Nalcor's determination that the Muskrat Falls project was the least cost option was reasonable. Whether Nalcor's conduct in retaining and subsequently dealing with contractors and suppliers of every kind was in accordance with best practice. Whether and how the terms of the contractual arrangements between Nalcor and the various contractors retained in relation to the Muskrat Falls project contributed to delays and cost overruns. Whether the overall project management structure Nalcor developed and followed was in accordance with best practice, and whether it contributed to cost increases and project delays. Whether the overall procurement strategy developed by Nalcor for the project was appropriate. Whether any risk assessments, financial or otherwise, in respect to the Muskrat Falls project were conducted in accordance with best practice, how Nalcor took possession of such reports, and whether Nalcor took appropriate actions and measures to mitigate the risks identified, and whether Nalcor made government aware of these reports. Whether the commercial arrangements Nalcor negotiated were reasonable and competently negotiated. The Commission of Inquiry will make recommendations that it considers necessary and advisable, and will deliver a final report to me as Minister of Natural Resources before December 31st, 2019. On behalf of the province's taxpayers and ratepayers, we will continue our efforts to move the project forward as effectively as possible, despite the challenges of the project we inherited. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I am pleased to be here with the Premier and Minister Cody as our government officially announces a public inquiry respecting the Muskrat Falls project. In accordance with Part 1 of the Public Inquiries Act 2006, we are establishing a Commission of Inquiry respecting the Muskrat Falls project. The Honourable Justice Richard D. LeBlanc of the Supreme Court of Newfoundland and Labrador is appointed as the sole Commissioner and will conduct the inquiry, which is expected to take approximately 2 years. I would like to thank Justice LeBlanc for accepting the duties as Commissioner. Justice LeBlanc started his career as a provincial court judge in Wabush, and for the last 6 years he has been serving as the senior administrative judge with the Family Division of the Supreme Court of Newfoundland and Labrador. In his years in private practice, Justice LeBlanc focused mainly on Aboriginal, criminal, civil, and property law. We are extremely grateful to have someone with his expertise lead this inquiry, and I am extremely confident in his ability to achieve thoroughness and accuracy in addressing this enormous task. As my colleagues indicated, we will be releasing the terms of reference today. The Public Inquiries Act 2006 gives the Commission broad authority to determine its own procedures, to determine who may participate, and how evidence will be received. The magnitude of this inquiry is significant. It will provide a thorough and detailed review of the facts and circumstances in their entirety. People who believe they have an interest in the subject of the inquiry will have an opportunity to apply to participate. Under the legislation, the Commissioner will determine who participates and how evidence will be received. The Commission also has the authority to issue a summons to compel a person to participate in the inquiry. This will ensure all information is considered. Nothing will be left unanswered. The terms of reference of the inquiry ask the Commission to examine information that informed the sanction of the Muskrat Falls project in 2012. However, it will be within the discretion of the Commission to determine how far back it needs to go. As is laid out in Section 22 of the Act, I will work with the Commission in the coming weeks to determine the resources required for the inquiry, and this will be reflected in our 2018-2019 budget. As the Minister of Justice and Public Safety, I am responsible for the Public Inquiries Act. However, the independence of the inquiry is crucial in maintaining public confidence in our system. Thank you.
So with Justice LeBlanc's report due at the end of 2019, that's around the same time the project is supposed to be finished. So does that mean recommending halting the project or making changes to the project is off the table for this inquiry?
Well, what we know about halting the project or stopping the project in this particular case is that the bills and the associated invoices and costs of this project will not go away. The cost of this project, the legal obligations, and the conditions within the federal loan guarantee will stay in place. So the cost of the project will be borne by the ratepayers, taxpayers of this province. If this was shut down today or in 2019, those costs remain. This will have an impact on future generations, current and future generations of our province. So stopping the project is not going to make the bills or the responsibilities go away with the Muskrat Falls project.
I want to ask about the timing of this. December 31st, 2019, it could be earlier, but if it comes in on deadline, that's going to be after the provincial election. Why not have this report done before voters go to the polls?
Well, you know, first of all, when you sit down and you look at the terms of reference and you discuss the scope and the magnitude of what this inquiry would look like, through the judgment of, the Justice Richard LeBlanc, in his determination, it was his suggestion then that this would be on December the 31st, 2019. And so this was a date that was given to us, by the justice in this particular case. This was the appropriate amount of time that he felt was necessary to get this amount of work done.
Would you like to see the report come out before the election?
There's a lot of information I would have liked seen come out before the 2015 election, as an example. There was questions I went looking for then that I thought people should know. But, I leave this to be an independent analysis, an independent review, an independent inquiry. The dates that's chosen is the one that is chosen by Justice Richard LeBlanc himself, and we certainly appreciate the fact that he put that timeline in place, and that's his timeline. For us, we'll continue to do what's right for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. We know that there's a significant amount of work that we need to do with rate mitigation, given the impact of this project on the future generations of our province.
And Premier, to what extent are you confident that you'll get the answers from this sort of process that you might get from, say, a forensic audit?
Well, as been mentioned by the minister, that if you look at the sections within the terms of reference there, you'll see there are provisions to for the commissioner to actually use the expertise, the financial expertise, either for this inquiry. It could also mean there'd be engineering, construction, and so on. But there is provisions there that for the commissioner to actually do a forensic audit if indeed he sees fit. And that provision is there. I think this inquiry goes much deeper, much broader, and that's the reason why we wanted to make sure that the scope was broad enough to give the commissioner the kind, the breadth, and the depth of that he would need to actually get to the answers, so that people in Newfoundland and Labrador could actually restore confidence in the young men and women, the skilled workforce that we have as we take on future projects in the future.
If I could jump in also, sorry to interrupt, but with the public inquiry, the commissioner has the power to compel people to appear before the inquiry to give evidence and give testimony, and we think that's also extremely important.
And Fraser, just to follow up, what would you say to those who would have liked to have seen more of an environmental component to this process?
Well, there's provisions there within Section 5, I think it is, in Section 5, to include Indigenous peoples into this inquiry, and I'm suggesting, I think they will seek standing, but we must not forget the significant amount of work that we've done already on the Muskrat Falls project and working with Indigenous peoples in Labrador and throughout the province. The IEAC, I think, the Independent Expert Advisory Committee, is a good example of how we've worked with all three Indigenous groups in Labrador to address some of the concerns around the environmental issues. I will say, too, that there's been a work done with the Nunatuavut members to actually get them in a position where they would also be able to participate in a more meaningful way. So aside from the inquiry, we've taken the responsibility of working very closely with our Indigenous peoples. But inside the inquiry, there's provisions there for them to be included. And I'm hoping, and I have a good feeling that they will want to participate in this inquiry as well.
The Indigenous community, though, is not the only one that's concerned about the environmental impact. Why is there not specifically an inquiry component that would include environmental? Because they're living there, yes, it affects them, there's no doubt about that, but the environmental, maybe there are answers to be found in the lack of environmental oversight, if that's what the commissioner finds.
Well, this is a broad inquiry, and we're fully anticipating that many people will bring their concerns. It's a long inquiry. We need to give the Justice LeBlanc the time that's required to make sure that we address the concerns. We've outlined this in the inquiry about what the options would have been in terms of meeting the electricity needs. Are they fully reflective of where we were, where this project ended up, around cost, why the PUB was taking out. So it's a very broad range of in this inquiry, which will allow people that to address their concerns in front of the inquiry. And I'm anticipating many of those concerns will be brought to Justice LeBlanc.
Will the commission have access to cabinet records?
For us, I think they will. As you look at when you look at public inquiries, they have a right to go in and look at cabinet documents. All I can tell you is that any documents that we have had from our administration, we'll be more than willing to comply with Justice LeBlanc, and we will make sure that the level of information that he requires to make the best recommendations for the people of our province, we will make that information available.
Will Justice LeBlanc have access to NALCOR documents?
Yeah, matter of fact, and the minister has made NELCOR, they put them on alert quite some time ago to make sure that those documents are secure. And I would like to say, too, I think is a worthwhile point in knowing that the terms of reference that we're releasing here today was not decided by, or there was no input from NELCOR. They will participate. They said they would participate in this inquiry, and those documents, I'm confident, will be open for review by the Justice and by the Commissioner.
Government an estimate on the impact of the inquiry, if any, on project completion?
Not right now. We know the project is, as of September the end of September 2017, 85% complete. You've heard me say many times that the importance of the timing around this inquiry would be that we would not disrupt the construction of the project. We feel, and we've had those discussions with NALCOR, that we're in a position now to be able to get this inquiry started. People have been waiting for quite some time to get this done, and we are now in a position to get this inquiry started. That was done, Andrew would have a better idea than that, but it was,
It would have been a number of weeks ago. There's a protocol in place as it relates to any inquiry that you're supposed to reach out to the Chief Justices of your court. So that's a conversation that I've had some time ago. We've known since the Premier announced it that this was upcoming, so we reached out. But it is a huge commitment. This is even more so than the last inquiry we did. This is a huge time commitment, so we wanted to make sure that we could get an individuals prepared to take this on. So to get someone of Justice LeBlanc's capability and caliber was excellent. On a number of weeks ago, I'm trying to think now, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, yes.
So just by way of clarity, during the summer and into the fall, following the Premier's discussion around the possibility of an inquiry, we've been looking at the terms of reference, developing those terms of reference, and then as we came towards a fruition of having something to discuss, then Minister Parsons discussed it with the Chief Justice.
There's a specific set of concerns around the North Spur. Will the inquiry be able to look at that?
well, as you know, there's been a considerable amount of work that's been done with the North Spur, and we've shared those, the engineering around the construction and the mitigation efforts that have been taken around the North Spur that was shared in Labrador last January. And so we expect there'll be questions about that, but, you know, I'll leave those determinations to Justice LeBlanc. But we do know there's a significant amount of work that's been done already by many engineering groups and studies that's been done. And, you know, Siobhan would have probably a better answer on, you know, how many has been done. But I know there's been quite a few. And so, you know, we'll see where this unfolds within the inquiry to see what questions will be raised about that particular area.
The scope of the inquiry allows for, you know, is very broad. And, you know, if you look at the scope of the inquiry, it talks about what risk assessments you would have undertaken by NALCOR, whether or not these were reasonable, whether or not what measures were taken to mitigate these risks. And as the Premier said, there's been a number of mitigations and things done for the North Spur, but whether Justice LeBlanc looks into those would be his opportunity to do so, because it's very broad under the public inquiries.
He has to consider participation of Indigenous leaders. Now, is this only going to be in St. John's, or can he do hearings in Labrador as well?
That's a good question. The determination
With this,
on
there's
where
a
they'll
lot
be
of
held.
the logistics that's left to be figured out. That's, I believe, Justice LeBlanc, who's actually sitting, that's the reason he's not here today, is he's actually sitting in court, and we didn't want to disrupt matters previously scheduled. But he will be appearing before the media in the near future once we have some more work done on, you know, place of, you know, where we're going to have this and all the logistics that goes into that. So that'll be a question better asked then.
I just want to go back to the cabinet records. You said you're certainly open to releasing any cabinet records to the inquiry. Is it then essentially up to members? Are you able to give them access to previous government's cabinet records as well, or will that be up to previous? How exactly will that work?
You know, my understanding of the way that would work is that the commissioner, as the commissioner for the public inquiries, well, they have the authority to review cabinet documents, and so for analysis. And so we'll see, you know, what happens. We could see challenges on that through this whole process. It's, you know, too early to tell what that will look like, but it is my understanding that the authority rests with the commissioner to actually review cabinet documents.
So at the end of this process, there can be no civil or criminal finding. Muskrat Falls is still there. Ratepayers are probably going to be paying more. The cost overruns will still be there, and you'll have added the cost of this inquiry. What will have been achieved at the end of the process?
There are a couple of things. Is that, and as Andrew would point out, I'm sure, is that when you start any inquiry, the first question you want answered is what happened here. And then the secondly is what lessons do you learn so that it doesn't happen again. People have asked a lot of questions, and no matter where we go in this province, people want to know how we got from an announcement of a project of just over $5 billion to a project today at $12.7 billion. It's a project, when you look at the last 5 years, on average, it spends $6 million a day. So that's the impact, and will have an impact on future generations. So the inquiry will have value. There will be lessons that we would have learned. There will be recommendations that will come out of this. What I want to do is make sure that we restore the confidence in Newfoundlanders and Labradorians that we can actually do projects. We have the skill sets to do it. But we need to know is that the decisions that were made at the beginning, at sanction time of this project, indeed were they right? And what lessons did we learn along the way so that we prevent this from happening again in the future?
So as a longtime opponent of the project, you were in opposition, and you've made that clear again today. If it comes back that everything was done right, is that an outcome that you're prepared to accept?
Well, the outcome is what I opposed in the beginning was a project that at just over $5 billion. This project is not at $5 billion. It will never be a $5 billion project. I always felt for any number of reasons when it was not popular to be not supporting the Muskrat Falls project, that this would have far-reaching impacts on Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, that it would impact rates, and maybe that all the options were not considered. The fact that oil would always be over $100 a barrel was not something that I ever supported. But this is not about I told you so at all. This is about the confidence of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and that we can be confident to take on major projects again in the future. That is what I want to find out from all of this. And I will tell you, if the commissioner files a report in 2019 and says that this was the right project, given the magnitude, the scope, the cost, and the far-reaching impacts, well, then I will look at him and say, thank you for your report. Well done.
On cost of the inquiry, sir, on cost of the inquiry, do you see any point in time, any number at which the provincial government would say, okay, that's maybe a bit too much?
Well, you know, once you start an inquiry and you make a commitment to get the answers that are required, the answers that people want to know, you know, that's the cost of the inquiry. Right here, there's a timeline that we'll put onto this. You know, with the Minister of Justice and Public Safety, they will work out a budget. Right now, this will be essentially a 2-year inquiry. But at the end of the day, let's not forget that we are spending $6 million a day on this project on average. The impact there will be tremendous for current and future generations. So this is where we are with this. The project will now meet over the next 2 years. There will be recommendations that will come out of this, and we're committed to getting this done because people have a right to know.
So that's a no? Number two?
Shutting it down because of a budget.
No, the cost for the inquiry.
That's what I'm saying, is that we started this project right now. We must we must give the justice the tools that he requires to get the answers that people want to know. You know, the Justice LeBlanc himself here will manage the budget, and he will make sure that, you know, we get this completed and we get those questions answered.
I don't think this government's in a position to give a blank check to anybody. But that being said, there is an independence here, but we'd like to think that, you know what, the answers here need to come. I'd like to think that they have a recognition that, you know, we'll do everything that's possible to manage the cost to hold this inquiry, but at the end of the day, the answers need to come out here. There's simply too many questions being asked by too many people.
Thank you.
It is warm.
It's warm in here.